Today I'll be talking about Steve Beaver Menzies, one of Australia's greatest rugby league players. Beaver, the Steve Menzies story, was written by Menzies and Norman Tasker and published in 2008. This book gives a great insight to how the sports delivery systems work to develop Menzies into an elite athlete, and I'll also look at how Menzies became involved in the sport and what helped keep him there. A 7-year-old kid sits in his classroom at North Curl Public on the northern beaches of Sydney when a note is handed out. A pretty routine situation for any child at school, but this note was about to change the course of one young man's life.
I have my brother Jamie to thank for my start in football. Jamie is 2.5 years older than me, and when he was about 9 and I was 7, a note came around our school inviting players to join the Harbour Juniors. Jamie was desperate to play, and since he was my older brother, if it was good enough for him, it was good enough for me.
Green, in 2005, discusses in her article the main concerns that sporting bodies consider in their policy making. One of these is increasing a nation's pool of athletes who can be developed into international competitors. She says, "From this standpoint, the objective is to recruit people, particularly children and adolescents, into sports and then to develop a percentage of them, presumably those with talent, into higher calibre performers. This strategy, executed in such a simple method via a bulk mail out to schools in the area, has paid off and put Menzies on his way. But is it possible that a flyer in class really started his career? Firstly, Menzies explains that in his book, a family had always had a major interest in rugby league.
I often wonder whether I would have gotten into rugby league as I did had it not been for Jamie's early enthusiasm and my tendency to follow."
He goes on to say,
Football had always been high on the agenda in the Menzies household. My grandfather, Mackie Campbell, had played on the wing when Manly first joined the Premiership in 1947, and emotionally he was welded onto the club. When he was very ill late in life and should have had an operation to remove a leg, he declined to have it. He said it was his goal-kicking leg and he couldn't afford to lose it, which said something both of his courageous good humour and his attachment to rugby league.
Satira Dow and Shilbury discuss some studies into the effect role models have on junior athletes, and exposure to a role model couldn't come sooner than in the form of a relative. They say, studies exploring the impact of elite success on junior development conclude that the popularity of elite athletes goes hand in hand with young people's longing for someone with which to identify. According to Biskup and Pfister's 1999 study, a high percentage of boys had elite athletes as idols and saw them as role models for their strength, aggression, and ability to get things done. Menzies' grandma took him to almost every Manly home game, and his mother was a representative Manly touch football player. I believe these factors work together to give Menzies his start in rugby league. In isolation, perhaps neither would be enough. Menzies had grown up in an environment in which rugby league was a loved sport. However, it wasn't until the note arrived in his hands during class one day that he actually acted as a catalyst to get him signed up. Menzies talked about the fact that when he was a junior, modifications to the sport to make it easier for small kids weren't really a thing.
In the days when I started junior football, there was no mod league or mini league. We played with full teams and on full fields from about under 10s upwards, and when you're a little nipper at one end of the field, the other end is a long way away.
What other strategies were at play then to help retain this kid who followed his brother into the sport and was also playing other sports? Satira Dow and Shilbury reflect on the results of their research on what it takes to retain athletes. They say, one belief common to every NSO was that the competitions are the foundation stone of Australia's international success and to assist with the retention, skilling and progression of athletes. To illustrate the capacity of competitions to keep athletes' interest levels high and gives them the incentives to remain in the game, in the year 2000, Soccer Australia explained the lack of exposure to quality competition will dull the most talented group of athletes. The Australian Rugby League introduced extra competitions to give players in regions not participating in the Bundy Gold Cup the opportunity to play additional representative football as an incentive to stay involved in the game. Green also looked at research to understand what keeps players in their sports. She says, sports psychologists have identified a number of significant motives for sport participation, including exhilaration, social interaction, skill development, team affiliation and fitness, noting a Cox 2002 study. Menzies' career certainly supports the team affiliation motive. He played all his junior football with one club, over 200 games, and all his professional football in Australia with one club, nearly 350 games. While playing at Harwood, Menzies had exposure to higher levels of competition via the New South Wales Rugby League run Harold Matthews Cup for under 16s and 17s and the SG Ball Cup for under 17s and 18s. These shortened competitions ran early in the regular football season with a smaller round-robin style similar to regular rugby league. Several weeks of finals occurred to produce the best team overall. Menzies represented Manly in both these sides and went on to play in the under-20s Jersey Flegg side, the then under-20s National League comp. Not only were these new competitions for Menzies and new opportunities, they also provided mateship. Menzies talked about in the book the unique camaraderie experience you get playing sport and reflects on one such time where mateship and elite competitions combine.
My final year at Freshwater High in 1991 brought the special joys of the Commonwealth Bank Cup. This was a schoolboy competition open to all schools, much along the lines of the old University Shield, but it had one crucial element that drew us in like magnets. It was televised. The games were pretty good, well presented on top fields with good referees and the rest, but the TV replay on Sunday mornings and the swagger we all took to school on Monday when we had been featured the day before were the supreme joys of schoolboy life.
Therefore, I think this capacity to test his skills at a higher level, while undoubtedly a great motivator, wasn't the only thing keeping Menzies in the sport. In another study by Coote in 1999, he looked into the family environment of a developing athlete and found that there was a trend of academic focus in these families. He says, in all of the interviewed families, it was acknowledged that school achievement was more important than sports achievement. This was true too for Menzies' family. His stepfather was a high school teacher and suggested that Menzies repeat Year 12 when he finished with a fairly average score. That advice proved precious, as Menzies says this was when rugby league became a serious subject. It was 1992 and Menzies made his first national side, the Australian schoolboys team, as well as the New South Wales team. Menzies went on a tour of New Zealand with the schoolboys team. Another of Green's discussed theories comes into play here, as Menzies was selected to play after injuries had left the schoolboys team short. Menzies offered to play on the wing despite never playing in that position in his life. Undermining theory suggests that a relatively high ratio of opportunities to participate will increase athlete commitment, like becoming a starter. It was also in 1992 that Menzies sparked the interest of a rugby league club, signing up to Manly Sea Eagles for the 1993 season. Menzies had a great start to his professional career in 1993 with Manly and describes in his book that it's hard to believe that the season finished with his selection for the Australian team for 1994. Menzies went on to play for Manly for 15 years, represent New South Wales instead of Origin, and continued to play for Australia. He also won a series of honours and is the second highest try-scoring forward the game has seen. I think Menzies had a great grasp of all of the factors that led to his success in football, perhaps just not viewed in such a deliberate way. Menzies also progressed through the tiered competition system successfully, progressing from level to level as his talents continued to develop. In summary, it's clear to see that many strategies were employed in the making of Steve Menzies' successful career. He thoroughly enjoyed the mateship he found in sport, he had good competitions to develop his skills in, and he was encouraged by family members who he also saw as role models from a young age. The research supports that all of these things contribute to recruiting and retaining athletes and allowing them to progress their development.